Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. If you've never joined us on the webinar before, there is a chat box on the right side of your screen, and you can type in questions there directly to us. This is going to be an interactive webinar. I always love questions and comments. It just helps things be a little bit more interesting, and we all learn from each other a little bit more that way too. So feel free to ask any questions or make any comments that you have in that chat box on the right. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Dr. Barbara Ezrre. I'm a naturopathic physician, and I've been in practice a little over 15 years now. I specialize in women's health, menopause, perimenopause, any kind of like hormonal imbalances, thyroid, fatigue issues. And then I do a lot with like pelvic health and urinary leakage, pelvic pain, those kinds of stuff, as well as some anti-aging and aesthetic medicine. And then the other part that I love is working on mental emotional well-being and just helping my patients really feel happier, more relaxed, more fulfilled, really just being able to enjoy life a little bit better too, because that's an important aspect of our health as well. And please let me know. It seems like one person is having trouble hearing me, but please let me know if there's anybody else that's having a hard time hearing me. So today for the webinar, I wanted to talk about self-care and like why that's important to our like physical well-being and mental and emotional well-being as well too. And then I wanted to give you some 9 tools to be able to implement that in your daily life starting today. So easy things. Not going to sit here and tell you need to like completely revamp your diet or start a major exercise routine, because I really do think it needs to be something that is doable, that you can do every day. And then I want to talk about like setting boundaries and like why that's such an important part of self-care. If not like the most important, definitely one of the top most important ways that we can really create better self-care for ourselves. And then, but what does that mean and how do we actually do that? It's a lot easier said than done, especially if it's never been modeled. So we're going to go through some examples on how to do that as well. So what is self-care? Self-care is being mindful of your own needs, like really having that self-awareness and taking that moment to like think about what's happening inside my body right now. What am I feeling? What's going on in my head? So that we can have that awareness and start to address our own needs. Because really we have to take care of ourselves first before we can really help others. So it's like the oxygen mask on the airplane, right? They always tell us parents, put your own mask on first and then help your kids in the event of an emergency. So it's the same thing with self-care. Filling up your cup first allows you to be able to show up and be the person that you need to be for the people that you love around you. And typically when we're stressed or overwhelmed, that's usually when we stop doing the self-care. We stop really taking a moment to look inside, and then it's hard to actually like feel engaged in our own lives and feel like we are driving that car, right? And in control of what's happening to us. We tend to be much more in like reactive mode. And the other important part of self-care, if you have children, I love talking to moms and dads about this because we're modeling that for our children. So the more that we adopt it, the better that they're going to be, so that later on they're not having struggles with their own health and mental emotional well-being, if they were able to see us really implementing those things in our daily lives. So like I said, it starts with looking inward, having that self-awareness of like what's going on inside my body. Why am I upset right now? Why am I tense? Why does it feel like my stomach's in a knot or my shoulders feel like they're up? I'm wearing them like earrings. And like what triggered that, what set that off, and what is it exactly that I'm feeling? So it's very easy to say, oh, I'm stressed, but what does that actually mean? Does it mean like you're anxious? Does it that you're feeling panic right now? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling disillusioned, disappointed? And so then once you can actually name that feeling, then you can start to explore that and see why that's coming up and what we need to do to help ourselves get out of that funk that we're feeling. So there's a lot of things that we can do that can make a really big impact that really don't require a whole lot of effort. So breathing, we're going to talk about a little bit more, really paying attention to how we're breathing, how much we're sleeping. Sleep also tends to go out the window when we're more stressed. Either we have a harder time sleeping when we're stressed, or we're so busy doing stuff that we're getting in bed late or getting up really early, and really just burning the candle at both ends. Physical touch is another really nice way that we can get back into feeling like in that calmer mode. And we'll talk about how we can do that. Moving our bodies. Again, I said I wasn't going to make recommendations for big exercise routines, but there are simple things that you can do to just move your body, even just 1% more during the day, and each day that is compounding. And then for boundaries, we'll talk about that. Getting outdoors, practicing gratitude, really just being grateful for the things that we do have in our lives, the people that we have in our lives. That is a really good way to reset and move our awareness into a more positive space, because I think a lot of times when things are not going that well, we can become very negative and focus on all the things that are not going right, the things that are missing in our lives. And if we can just take even just a minute a day in the morning when we first wake up, or when we go to bed before we fall asleep, as we're kind of drifting off, just thinking about all those things that are going really well in our lives, and the people that are important to us that we're grateful for. Even just practicing like a gratitude meditation, where you just think about and like relive those moments that were really important in our lives and impactful, can like be really powerful. And again, it can take just a minute of like reliving that, sending out, a text message or calling up somebody that you love and just telling them how grateful you are. Not only helps you feel better, but it also can really brighten someone's day. So that's also something that's a good little thing to do every day for people that you care about. And it only takes us like a few seconds, especially if it's just a text message. Finding ways to create joy in our lives is also really important, because I think as Americans, we're so focused on like productivity and doing, and we lose that ability to play, especially for some of us that like had to grow up at a really young age. We kind of started working really young and stopped playing. And the more that we can maintain play in our lives, the younger that we stay longer, right? And that's one of the big goals that we should all have in life, is really figuring out how to stay young as long as possible, so that we age much healthier. We can really stay healthy up until the very end, hopefully. Finding ways, doing the things that you used to do, maybe a lot more of, that brought you a lot of joy when you were a kid or a young adult, that maybe haven't been doing lately, starting to like implement that again in our lives. And sometimes it is just finding joy in like the most typically boring of experiences. You can find joy doing laundry. I had, as a quick funny story, I had a wonderful like washer and dryer that was given to us when we first moved into our house, like when my husband and I were first together. And so and we never had like a great washer and dryer when we were kids, so it was always just like a struggle. And so like I loved doing laundry because it was so much easier than it used to be, and I just found a lot of joy in doing laundry. It's not quite as joyful as it used to be now that we have several kids, and laundry has compounded by quite a bit, but it's really just finding joy in whatever it is that you're doing in that moment. It can be something as simple as that. And then eliminating like dairy, wheat, and sugar as like a detox. Again, this one's not quite as easy as some of the other things to implement, but for some people that can make such a big difference in how they're feeling. And if it doesn't feel too overwhelming to do that, I definitely would recommend to at least try it once, because it could really clue you in as to like some of the inflammation and that some of these foods are causing in the body that can really affect like energy and brain fog, headaches, joint pain. And those are the most typical offenders. And then the last thing, and I'm not going to have time to get into it much more in depth today, but really looking at hormone imbalances, because it makes, when we are not feeling well because of these hormone imbalances, it makes it a lot harder to do just like the regular daily things, and everything feels like a struggle. It's like a struggle just to get through the day. You just feel like at the end of the day, you just barely survived the day. So really working with somebody that can understand how to interpret laboratory results for hormones and what symptoms can be affected by those hormone imbalances, so that we can like get you feeling back on track and feeling good again, so that it is easier to do something like a 7-day detox from dairy, wheat, and sugar, and not feel like it's completely overwhelming. So we do have some more videos on our YouTube channel if you want to check that out, that talk about the hormone imbalances as well. Or feel free to give our office a call, and somebody can talk to you more about how it might be affecting you. So breathing. So usually when we are stressed, we tend to breathe a lot more shallow. And so, or we like actually hold our breaths, and we can go like several seconds without breathing. And so we need to be reminding ourselves regularly to breathe, not even like deep breaths necessarily, but just breathe. And especially when you're feeling like really overwhelmed or stressed, or you're running around at work, or you're just go, that's when you really, and you're feeling, you can, have that awareness in your body that everything is just kind of tense, like your chest feels tense, your shoulders are rolled over, you're feeling tight everywhere. Just kind of like let your shoulders fall back and relax, and take a deep breath. And breathing, like, it is like the number one easy thing that we can do to help our bodies get out of that sympathetic mode, that fight or flight response, and back into the parasympathetic mode. Because ideally, we want most of our time to be in the parasympathetic mode. And then if we have like a big stressor, then we jump into that sympathetic mode. But for a lot of us, and especially after like the last couple of years with COVID and quarantining and distance learning with children, and all the craziness that has happened in the world, I think a lot of people right now are kind of living their lives in a sympathetic mode. And every once in a while, they're getting into that parasympathetic mode. And that's going to affect not just like mentally and emotionally, but it's also going to affect how you can digest your food. So if you have chronic constipation and you're feeling stressed a lot, that fight or flight response is making it harder for you to actually digest your food. It's going to affect how you're able to sleep, because if we're in that fight or flight response, then we can't like fully relax enough to get into that deep sleep. And so if you're having trouble sleeping, either falling asleep or staying asleep, or never really feeling like you get into that deep sleep, that could be a big part of it as well. So one of like the easiest things that you can do is just start reminding yourself every like hour, every couple of hours, just take a deep breath, and just once or twice, and then move on to your next thing. You don't even have to really like stop what you're doing to do that. You can do that simultaneously as you're doing your other stuff. And everybody wants to just practice that right now. Just take a big deep breath and out. And I'm sure you guys can already feel like you're like a little bit calmer, a little bit more relaxed than you were like right before you took that deep breath. So it's something so simple that can just make a big difference, especially as we feel like we're getting more and more ramped up. And then there are also some apps that help with breathing, like reminders. So the Breathing Zone app I really like right now. It's like $2 or $3, I think. But you can set it to just like 6 breaths a minute or so that it's counting you out and counting you in and telling you when to breathe in and when to breathe out. And then if you follow it through, you end up taking like 10 deep breaths, 10 full breaths, let's say, for that minute. And so if you can do it ideally like 10 minutes, a day. 20 minutes is fantastic, but you can just work your way up to that. And so that I found really helpful for myself personally, and several of my patients have really enjoyed using that. That's a nice one to do before bed, also to get us into that parasympathetic mode so that we can sleep a little bit deeper. And then there is also like the square breathing, where you breathe in to a count of 4, hold it to a count of 4, breathe out to a count of 4, hold it to a count of 4, and then again, breathe in to a count of 4. So I think of it like a square because you're breathing in to a count of 4, holding it to a count of 4, breathing out to a count of 4, holding it for a count of 4, and then you repeat that. So it's like this nice little square that I kind of envision in my mind. And that's also something that you can do like at any point. You can do that if you're sitting in the middle of a meeting. Obviously, if you're talking, you can't do that. But if you're just sitting there listening, you can do that. Nobody knows what you're doing, but it can be if it's like a tense meeting, or you're still feeling stressed about the last meeting or whatever happened, this morning when you guys were getting ready for work and it was all craziness at home. That can just help you reset. And again, you can do it kind of just quietly on your own at any point. Nobody knows what you're doing. And it is really important to take like the brain and eye break also about every 55 minutes for optimal productivity. So that research has shown that if we can take a break every 55 minutes or so, maybe it's a little bit beyond that or a little bit sooner than that for you, but really just taking even a minute to like look away from the screens, think about something else, just kind of relax, take a few breaths, stand up, do like, a squat or two, or, something that gets you out of what you're doing. And then going back to what you were doing also helps to reset and helps break up the day. So it doesn't feel like you are pushing yourself so hard throughout the day. So that's a nice combination with the breathing. And then sleep. So optimally, we want to be getting like 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. And 7 hours is really like the bare minimum for sleep. So, and I think about, along with, so 7 hours is the bare minimum. If you've had a lot of stress for a while now, like really we should be getting up to 9 hours is really the bare minimum. And the reason I say this is because I think of sleep kind of like sleep, like credit card debt. So I call it sleep debt. So when we have been overspending our credit card, we rack up this huge bill, right? And then if we just make the minimum payments every month, it's going to take forever to get out of debt. And so it's the same thing with sleep. If you've been cutting your sleep short for a long time, you're going to need to sleep extra to really make up for that and to be able to get out of that sleep debt and start really feeling better. And of course, hormone imbalances can also play into like the quality of sleep and your energy levels. But this is a good way to help reset and restore your cortisol, is really just by increasing your sleep. And, maybe you're getting like 5 hours of sleep right now because everything is so insane. Can you at least increase it by 15 minutes and just set your timer on your phone to kind of go off so that you're at least getting in bed 15 minutes earlier or 30 minutes, whatever you can start doing, even if it's just a tiny bit, it's still something. And it still starts to like work on creating a little bit better habits so that you're not cutting yourself short on that sleep. And if you are somebody that has trouble sleeping, avoiding screens for an hour before bed is really important because it affects our melatonin levels. So it's going to affect how deep we can get into that sleep. Doing a little bit of yoga before bed, there's a ton of YouTube videos that are free that go through yoga sequences and for sleep. And they're anywhere from like 5 minutes up to like 20 minutes or an hour. So if you only have 5 minutes, just do the 5 minutes. And then once you run through the video a few times, then you can just kind of do it on your own. You don't necessarily have to follow the video. But I've had a lot of patients find that really helpful to be able to help them unwind, let go and release whatever's happened in the day. So they're not still like holding on to I should have done this, or I needed to do this, or tomorrow I'm going to have to do all of this. And then journaling or making like lists of to-dos. So journaling, even if it's just like writing out whatever's in your head, just like a mental dump basically on the paper. So whatever words come to your mind, just write that out so that it just gets out of your head and your brain's not like thinking about it and trying to process it all night long while you're trying to sleep. And then if you do feel like you have just so much stuff to do and so much on your plate, just writing a list of all the things you need to do the next day and getting that out of your head before you go to sleep is also really helpful, so that you're not waking up in the middle of the night thinking, oh my gosh, I have to remember to call so-and-so, or I have to remember to email this person. Just kind of get it out of your head. You know that it's there and you'll get to it tomorrow and you don't have to worry about it while you're sleeping. Physical touch, like I mentioned, this is a really important thing that we need to be more aware of as humans, because humans are hardwired for human touch. Like, we should be touching each other, obviously, you know, in a good way, but we should be touching each other. And especially in the last 2 years with COVID, people are no longer hugging, people are no longer shaking hands, or, you know, touching, patting people on the back. So people can go for days, especially if they live alone, without ever like being touched by another human being. And so it's an important part of our human development. There was an orphanage, I think in Romania, that they studied, where the babies, like, there were just so many babies and not enough attendance, and they were basically just left in their cribs all day long. Maybe they got, you know, let out to play for a little bit, and then the rest of the time they were in their cribs. And they had actually developed abnormally because of the lack of physical touch. So it's actually very important for our development as children, but even into an adulthood. It's one way that we communicate with each other, that we establish relationships. They've done studies on like people that, you know, shake hands, or they, you know, do a nice to meet you and like pat on the back or something at the same time. And they actually develop better rapport when there's some kind of like little physical touch than when they're just strictly speaking to each other. And one of the reasons why it's so important is because it increases our oxytocin levels, which is our cuddling hormone, or we call it the love hormone. And this is it's the hormone that's increased when like we're cuddling with holding our babies. It has activity in lactation, breastfeeding, but it also just increases by holding one another. And it increases immune function, it decreases cortisol. It also is involved in like intimacy and being able to climax. So it's a very important hormone for lots of different functions. And tech and social distancing has really limited this. So one thing I hadn't thought about was just how much less we are touching each other because of all the technology that we're constantly on. So normally, you know, 20 years ago, you know, if we were sitting around with a friend or a loved one, our spouses, and we didn't have our phones, and you'd be like kind of like sitting next to them, hugging each other, holding hands. And now with technology, everyone's on their phone. And so part of what's limiting our physical touch is how much we're on our phones, how much technology we're using all day long. And another type, so one of my favorite physical touches is hugs. And really we need like a bare minimum of 4 hugs a day for survival. 8 hugs is really what's needed for maintenance, and 12 hugs are what's needed for growth. So I would really encourage all of you guys to really look at that and see if you can hit at least 8 hugs a day, if not the 12. And really like good, strong, you know, hugs that you kind of lean into. Those are the best ones. So moving your body, like I mentioned, it doesn't need to be like a big old exercise routine. It can just be getting out there, like doing some stretches, doing a few squats in your office, doing, you know, forward bending, twisting, even twisting in your chair. Or so if you're sitting all day, if you're on your computer, the more that you can kind of like twist in your chair, kind of roll your neck in all the directions, and really kind of like stretch out your upper back is really helpful too. So to at least move those joints that otherwise would be, pretty limited in their range of motion. You can also, when you like kind of scan your body, I usually do it standing up, but just kind of scan your body from head to toe and then work your way down and see kind of where you feel tension. You can close your eyes, so it kind of takes out all other stimuli, but just work your way down and kind of stop where you feel tension, tighten it, and then relax it. So that's a nice little thing that you can do that takes like 30 seconds to a minute. And then really just paying attention to how you can get some extra steps in is also a nice little place to start. But physical activity is really important. I mean, not just for like our physical well-being, but it also improves like mood, helps us move into that parasympathetic state again, so we feel more relaxed. It decreases stress, and it can be as effective as antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications. According to several studies, it can boost our energy, and when we are moving our body, we do tend to get better sleep. Spending time outdoors is also really important. So that helps decrease cortisol levels. It increases anxiety and depression. It helps us feel more focused in our minds and energized. It actually improves creativity. So if you do a lot of like creative work in your job, it's good to get outdoors to help support that. It's going to increase vitamin D when we're spending time in the sun as well. And one study indicated like significant improvement in health and well-being with just 2 hours a week in nature. So, going on a little hike on the weekend can really make a big difference for the entire week. So that can be just going outside for a walk or a run, taking a bike ride, you can do more camping or hiking, gardening, even just moving like your office, like you're, sitting outside while you work on the laptop, or if you're going to do the yoga, like do it outside sometimes. So just however ways you can find a way to spend some time outdoors, maybe in the early day and end of the day. If you're here in Arizona, as it's starting to heat up. And then technology, I think, obviously has a lot of benefits, but there are some ways that it has impacted our lives negatively. So for a lot of people, it has become like an addiction, and it gets in the way of relationships because there's constant competition for our time and attention. And if we're focused on our, phones or what's happening on social media and checking that all the time, we're not giving that attention to other people in our lives, or vice versa. And with everything that's happened in the world, sometimes that also, like now you check the news and now you're feeling a little bit more down because of everything that's happening. So really trying to limit that makes a big difference in how calm or stressed you can feel. You can either go off of it completely and just, like choose a day a week, maybe Saturday or Sunday, where you're not working, so you don't need it for work, but where you can just go off of the technology and have a detox that day, like every week. And if the whole family can do it, that's great too. I do think that like our kids also are getting very much addicted to technology, and it can really make them moody. Kids that are playing video games all the time tend to have more like moodiness happening throughout the week. I've seen it with my own kid. I have one kid who doesn't really care about video games, and then the other one that gets sucked in really intensely, and then he gets really moody. He gets cranky if he can't play when he wants to play. And so I'll just take it away and go cold turkey on him. And he usually complains and cries about it for a few hours, up to a day. And then it's like I get my child back after that. So as parents, we really do need to be very mindful of how much they're being exposed to technology. And then the other big thing that I wanted to talk about is boundaries. So when we don't set healthy boundaries, it ends up increasing our stress. It can become a financial burden because people can take advantage of us financially. It can result in a lot of wasted time because if we don't value and respect our time, people aren't going to value and respect it either. It can lead to a lot of like resentment and conflict in relationships, and ultimately lead to a lot of like mental distress if we don't have good boundaries. So setting boundaries is figuring out what you want from whatever relationship and setting the boundary based on those desires, and then being clear with yourself and others about your boundaries. So boundaries can be like really rigid, or they can be really loose, or somewhere in between. And what we're aiming for is we just want the boundaries to be like clear and firm so that both the other person and you understand what the expectations are. And really, it's not about everybody else respecting your boundaries. It really is more, you have to respect your boundaries. You set the boundaries and then you respect them, and you make sure that they are clear and that they're not getting broken down. And in relationships, I think for a lot of people, people feel like if they set a boundary with somebody that they care about or they love, that the other person is going to feel like they don't care about them. But setting boundaries actually means that you do care about the relationship because you want it to work for both of you. And if you are not setting boundaries, over time, there's going to be resentments, there's going to be hurt feelings, and that's going to damage the relationship long term. And it can be really hard for some of us to learn how to set boundaries when we weren't modeled that by our parents and caregivers. So the good thing is that we can break that cycle and we can learn how to set good boundaries. And in that process, also teach our children and others around us how to set boundaries as well. So number one with boundaries, no is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain or give your reasoning on why you're saying no, or why you're saying that you can't do something. It's just no. And you say it like politely and respectfully, but that's your choice. Whoops. So I have an extra slide in here. Whoops. So some examples. The slide changed. Oops. Accidentally deleted a slide. So some examples for like setting boundaries might be something like if somebody's speaking down to you, you can say like, thank you, I understand what you're trying to say to me, and I would appreciate it if you didn't belittle me or talk down to me. Or if somebody's asking you to do something and you know that you don't have time to do it, or you know that that's going to just add to your stress level to have to figure out how to fit something in, you can say, unfortunately, I can't do that for you right now, that I don't have the bandwidth to do it, or I don't have the time in my schedule to be able to help you with that. You can offer, I'm happy to help you out in 2 weeks when my schedule slows down a little bit. Does anybody have any like areas that they're struggling with boundaries, or like specific situations? I think sometimes with family it can be difficult too. So learning how to set boundaries, maybe like talking about other people. Sometimes I think you get kind of pulled into like all the drama, right, of families, and somebody starts complaining about somebody else, and instead of like getting sucked into that, it's perfectly fair to say, I don't feel comfortable talking about that person right now. They're not here to, share their side of the situation. I think it would be best if you guys talked about that directly to each other. So I think the main thing to remember about boundaries is that it's not always easy to do, and sometimes it can be very difficult, but more importantly, the more that you do it, it's like a muscle. It starts getting, you kind of flex that muscle, it gets a little bit stronger, and it's easier to do the more that you do it. and people will respect you more for setting those boundaries, and you will feel calmer and less stressed because now you're putting yourself first and your needs first instead of trying to be everything for everybody. So what I would encourage you guys to do is to pick one thing that you can implement today out of everything that we talked about. You know, just one thing, whether it's like breathing a little bit easier, doing a few stretches, getting out for a walk tonight for 10 minutes, whatever it is, just pick one thing that you feel like resonated with you and that feels like it's pretty easy to implement and wouldn't require a ton of effort and time. And then think about one that you can implement next week. And then every week, just keep adding a little bit something in. It really is, it compounds over time. One of the books that we read here as a practice together talked about how pilots, if they aim, you know, for like New York, if they just shift their, you know, and they're flying out of LA, if they just shift the nose of the plane like 1%, they'll end up in Washington, DC. And so sometimes we think it's just such a small thing, like what difference is that going to make? But over time, it'll compound and it'll make a big difference over time. And so that's what we're really looking for, right? We're playing the long game. So just learning how the little things that we can do every day to create these habits that are going to make a big difference in the long run. And the other tip that I have for you is actually write it down. The more, when we make a goal and we actually put it in writing, we're much more likely to accomplish it than if we just kind of say it or think it. So write it down, make a quick note, put it on a Post-it, have it somewhere where you can see it regularly as a reminder to keep doing it. So I hope that you guys were able to learn something from this webinar today. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Give the office a call if you have any concern, health, medical, mental, emotional concerns that you want some support with, and we'd be happy to help you out. Until next time, take care.